Good evening, anarchists everywhere, and welcome to Anarchism in the UK. I'm Ian Bone. I've been an anarchist since 1963, and in all that time I can't recall there ever being a radio or TV programme on anarchism. So we aim to set that right over the next 6 weeks, when I'll be interviewing 6 anarchists about different eras of anarchist history in the UK. Tonight we'll be exploring the most notorious episode in anarchist history in this country, the Siege of Sidney Street in 1911, and finding the truth out at last about that mysterious man they call Peter the Painter. I'm joined by Phil Ruff, who's been an anarchist since 1972, on the editorial board of Anarchy magazine, Black Flag magazine, and worked for Cienfuegos Press. Phil has been at work since 1986 on his projected book, provisionally entitled The Life and Times of Peter the Painter. Welcome, Phil.
Good evening, Ian.
Could you give us a quick beginner's guide to the Siege of Sidney Street and the Houndsditch murders?
Yes, the Houndsditch murders, which happened on the 16th of December 1910, were still today the single most worst police murder in British history. A group of Latvian anarchists who were trying to tunnel through the wall of an adjacent building into a jeweller's shop were interrupted by a group of City of London policemen and opened fire, hitting 5 of them and killing 3. The only clues to the identity of the culprits was that one of the gang, who was accidentally wounded in the affray, was later found abandoned and dead in the East End flat of 2 Latvians known as Fritz Svars and Peter the Painter. On the 2nd of January 1911, Svars and his accomplice Sokolov were betrayed to the police by a former landlord, Charles Perlman, and besieged by 750 armed police and soldiers. The initial intention of the police was to ambush and kill the 2 fugitives, and to that purpose they'd drawn up 2 furniture vans full of armed police to attack the anarchists as they left the building. However, overcome by boredom, one of the police ambled up to the front of the building and threw pebbles against the window to attract the attention of the people inside, whereupon a fusillade of shots from inside erupted through the window and wounding the policeman and starting the siege, which lasted for 7 hours and was only concluded with the deaths of the 2 fugitives. It included a company of Scots Guards from the Tower of London, directed by the Home Secretary Winston Churchill, and even artillery field pieces were summoned to shell the anarchists into submission, although they arrived too late to take part in the battle.
Probably been an investigation by the police complaints authority today. 2 sort of side things that always interested me about the Siege of Sidney Street was that the 2 anarchists in there, their guns, which were like handguns, seemed to outshoot the Metropolitan Police and the Scots Guards. How was that?
Well, the anarchists in Sidney Street were armed with 3 weapons, 2 C96 Mauser broom-handled pistols and a Browning 7.65mm pistol. The broom-handled Mauser had an effective range of 1,000 yards and could penetrate masonry. If you fitted the wooden stock to it, became a carbine. Could be switched to full automatic, which made it a machine carbine, and was then the top of the line high-tech military carbine. So, even today it's still a formidable weapon.
And did one of the bullets go through Winston Churchill's top hat?
Well, it'd been nice to think it could have passed a little lower, but
the other thing that strikes me about the anarchists, when you see pictures of them, the ones associated with Sidney Street, was how flashily dressed and handsomely dressed they were in bow ties and frock coats.
Indeed,
a bit of a change from the sort of dog on a string anarchists we see today.
Yeah, Fritz Varzi died, as we can see for people who aren't on the radio. Prided himself, as did most of the anarchists, on their dress sense. And of course, being illegal activists, they found it easier to operate dressed as respectable bourgeois gentlemen. But it was the custom in those days to dress up, and they took a pride in their appearance. A
tradition we should perhaps look at re-establishing in the anarchist movement. At the time, there seemed to be a whole series of events. Previous to that, there had been the Tottenham outrage, and I think you've discovered the hitherto unknown Motherwell Bank job. Will you just say a couple of words to put those in context?
Yes, in April 1908, 3 Latvians walked into the Royal Bank of Scotland in Motherwell and attempted a rather botched armed robbery of the bank, which was followed by a chase and a scuffle with police, and 2 of them were arrested. The 3rd man escaped. The 2 people who were arrested were sentenced to 10 years in prison, and one of them indeed died a year later in Peterhead prison from TB.
And was this one of the first political bank robberies?
It was the first known political armed expropriation in Britain, as far as I'm aware. But it was one of a series of failed expropriations which directed public attention to Latvian revolutionaries.
Okay, the name Peter the Painter crops up in all the accounts of Sidney Street. There seem to be endless theories about who he was. Did he in fact exist? I've heard stories that in fact he was Stalin, who was in the country a few years before. He was a Bolshevik expropriated. He was Peter Piatka. He ended up in Australia and was seen on a train in Australia by Detective Superintendent Leeson. Of the existing theories before you established your research, do you dismiss all those?
Yes. The popular theories about Peter the Painter was, first of all, that he was an agent provocateur in the pay of the Tsarist police. That stems really from 2 sources: an anti-anarchist article by Harry Quelch, the editor of the English social democratic paper Justice, and a speech made by Ramsay MacDonald in Parliament. Riga examined extensively the files of the Riga police in Latvia and the Riga Okranka, the secret police, in which there are extensive reports about Peter the Painter. None of them suggest that he was in the pay of the police. Exactly the opposite. They were very desperate to apprehend and arrest him.
And he wasn't Stalin then?
He wasn't Stalin, no. This is a popular theory peddled by the policeman who was wounded at Sidney Street, Benjamin Leeson, who claimed that Stalin was the organiser of the Houndsditch robbery, and also cropped up in a series of fanciful books on intelligence subjects written by Richard Deacon, which is the pen name for Donald McCormick. Stalin is known to have visited England only once, in 1907, and in fact in 1910 he was in a Tsarist prison and was afterwards banished to Siberia, so he was actually in custody during the period. Another popular theory is that Peter the Painter later became an agent of Lenin's Cheka after the Russian Revolution. This is based on the idea that the cousin, that the Peter the Painter was a man called Jacob Peters, who was the cousin of Fritz Vars, who died in Sidney Street. Peters was in London at the period. He was a Latvian Bolshevik. But after the 1917 revolution, he returned to Russia and became deputy chief of the Cheka, the Russian secret police, and in fact was the architect of the Red Terror and the man personally responsible for annihilating the Russian anarchist movement. I can say without doubt that Peters was not involved with the Houndsditch robbery, although he's popularly said in the literature on the affair to be the man that fired the fatal shots at Houndsditch. I have positive documentary proof of his non-involvement, and he wasn't present at Houndsditch, he wasn't an anarchist, and he wasn't part of the group responsible.
Okay, well, it's an effective demolition of all the existing theories about Peter the Painter. Now we come to the $64,000 question, Phil. Who was Peter the Painter? Peter the Painter was a former Latvian social democrat called Jānis Žāklis, or Žākle. And his face first appeared on a wanted poster in London in 1911. He was said to have been the organiser of the Houndsditch robbery and to have been present at Sidney Street and escaped the siege, miraculously somehow. His name came into the case only